garlic, I'm going to show you how to peel, chop, mince, and slice garlic. So first thing to know is this is a head of garlic. So when a recipe says to use a clove of garlic, it does not mean this. This is a lot more than that. You can see that there's these little individual pieces of the garlic. Those are cloves. So this is a head, this is a clove. And most recipes will specify the number of cloves or maybe even an amount chopped up. So we don't want to use the outside peel. So I'll show you two ways. I slice off the end that was attached. So the part I sliced off was the part that was like attached to the bottom of the garlic. And then you can take a bigger knife like this, like a chef's knife, and put it on top, and then have your hand out with your palm down, and then your fingers you can see kind of go up. You just don't want them where they're going to hit the knife blade. And you want to give it a modest pressure tap. That you just want to hear that start of like a crushing sound of the garlic. You don't want to flatten it because that actually makes your job harder. So just that little bit of pressure where it just starts to crush will loosen the peel, but not crush your clove of garlic. And then it makes it pretty easy to peel. I'll just cut off this little piece that doesn't look great. If you have really, really fresh garlic, then sometimes the peel will stick a lot more. You know, if it's been sitting dry for a while, it won't stick as much. So now we have our clove of garlic. We can go ahead and mince it. So that's the most common preparation in cooking. Some people like to work with their small paring knife to do this. I find that, you know, it's just too much close work. I really like my 8-inch chef's knife, but use whatever feels comfortable to you. So the first thing you want to do with your fingers tucked under is just kind of roughly chop it up into some bigger pieces. And then I put the tip of my knife down on the board, and we'll just go back and forth in like a pie-shaped wedge and chop up and down. So do that. And then, so I'm not constantly grabbing another tool. This is where a lot of times I will use the back of my knife to get things in order. And I'm just holding my hand here for more stability. You just chop as much as you need. You can use, you know, scrape the bit sticking to your knife off with your scraper. And just keep chopping. Usually takes quite a few passes to get it finely minced. That looks pretty good. And there's maybe a few bigger pieces, but you know, that would be good enough for me for most things. So put that in a little pile. And especially when you're working with these little pieces of garlic, you know, this is when your scraper comes in really handy. You can just pick it up off the board and then move it in, put it in your pot or with the rest of your mise en place when you're prepping, and set that off to the side. So let's grab another clove of garlic. If you have trouble getting to the cloves, you can also just kind of peel off this extra papery coating. I usually just give a little bit of pressure and push down, and it will, whatever is loose will just peel right off. And pull off, find your first clove that looks good. And, you know, some people don't cut off the end, so I can kind of show you if you don't cut off the end what it looks like. And sometimes it will come off well, sometimes it won't. Okay. But you don't want to eat that little end part, so the other benefit of doing it ahead of time is it helps you peel it, and, you know, then you don't have to cut off later. Okay, so we're going to slice garlic. So what I'm doing is I'm keeping my fingers tucked under and then just doing that little tiny oval motion that I mentioned earlier in how to chop onions, which I would recommend you watch first when you're doing the knife skills. Okay, and just get as close to your finger as you can, and then you have some nice slices. If you want them to be a little bit more intact, let me show you another way to do that. So grab another clove, and I'll show you how to do this with a paring knife. So when you're doing you want like a perfect garlic slice, the paring knife is usually the tool to go to. So I'm just going to slice off that part that was stuck to the head. You can try and peel it without crushing. So when you crush it, you can see that you get some slices, but they're kind of broken apart a little bit, even if you don't crush it very much. So you can take the sharp end of your paring knife and, you know, kind of use your finger. I'm not cutting toward myself. I'm just kind of using that sharp edge to pick up the edge of that papery peel. And you can get under it with a knife and pull it off. I'm trying to do it slow, so hopefully you can see what I'm doing. Yeah, I did work one place where, you know, they're convinced that if you did that little crush to the garlic and then tried to slice it, that it would taste totally different than if you just, you know, took the time to peel it nicely and you had, you know, none of the juices leaking out and you went to slice it. So there's lots of schools of thought on that. I think for most people, certainly anyone I'm cooking for, they wouldn't be able to tell the difference, but I'm sure a very discerning palate would notice. All right, so I have my garlic. This one isn't crushed at all, tucking my fingers under, and I'm going to grab my paring knife just like I did my Big Chef's knife. I'm just going to make little, little cuts. It just allows me to work closer and more finely. And the goal is kind of like when you're doing onions and you're trying to do a salad slice, you just want, if you're not going to cook it very long, you want really papery thin slices. If you actually want a big bite of garlic, you want to be able to saute it for a little bit and really flavor some oil, you might want thicker slices. So just think about how long you're going to be cooking it for and how you're going to be preparing it. So I can't get any further, so there's definitely a big chunk left at the end of the garlic, right? And I'd risk cutting my fingers if I went any closer. So as long as you're not worried about it looking perfect like this, where you have, the perfectly circle piece of garlic, then you can just put the flat side down on the cutting board and then just make little slices that way too. In a restaurant, restaurant where you want everything to look perfect, then you might just use this little bit for something else. But that's how you would do the sliced garlic. And then let me show you how to do crushed garlic. Oftentimes this is done to make a paste. So we do this in the recipe for making guacamole. So I'll pull off another clove, cutting off the end, just loosening that peel by pressing on it. Even though I'm going to crush this, I still want to wait to crush it till after I peel it, just to make my job easier. Right, and so then what I actually like to do is, if I'm going to crush this to make a paste, I'll still rough chop it, just like as if I was going to mince at the first step. So I have, some bigger pieces here. Make sure that it looks like there's a little piece of that and or a little bad spot. So cut all that out. So everything here is what's going to be edible. And at this point, I'm going to put a little salt on there. That just helps break down the cell walls a little bit more quickly. I'll rough chop it a little bit more, and then I'm going to start pressing it with the side of my knife. So have it like that, rough chop, and then what you can do is you can put your flat side of your knife down. And this is where you're actually going to get that elbow grease. So I'm keeping my fingers up, there's no way to cut myself, and I'm just moving my knife back and forth, putting some pressure straight down. And then what I'm doing with my knife is I'm kind of going like this. So I'm not scraping the actual blade on the counter, but it's kind of like you're making a wave with it, I think is the best way to describe it. And you can see that the garlic's getting juicy now, so it's starting to get a little translucent. That's just because I'm breaking down those cell walls. If you find that you're having a hard time, you can add a little more salt. The more salt you add, the easier your work will be. Okay. Just keep scraping it up into a pile and smashing it until it's the consistency you want. If you find it was still too big, you can always mince it up a little bit more as well. But the more you break down your garlic, the stronger the flavor is going to be in your dish, especially if it's raw. So a lot of times, if it's crushed, you either are going to cook it in something, but you don't want to get any pieces of garlic in it, or you're going to have it totally raw, but you don't want any big chunk of raw garlic. And so that's why we use, do this for the guacamole recipes. We don't want a big piece of garlic, but we do want that, a little bit of that garlic punch in there. Okay, so I have a pretty good paste here. And could even go further if you want, but that's our various garlic cuts. So we have our minced, our sliced, where we, did the quick way where we crushed it a little bit first and then peeled it quickly and sliced it. Here's where we took time to, really peel it nicely and leave it, perfectly intact, make really nice slices. And then we have our crushed or smashed garlic. You'd get something similar to this with a garlic press. A lot of people, when I show this, will say, well, why in the heck don't you use a garlic press? It's so much faster and easier. You do lose a lot of the, like the fiber. You'll see if you ever use a garlic press, there's a lot of solid left over. Probably get a really similar flavor. There's probably not a ton of difference. It's just, you can actually accomplish that without actually having that tool if you want to. And I don't have a garlic press at home, so this is how I would do it. Now we'll move on to some other chopping techniques.